Tom's going to talk to us about their journey to net zero, transforming aviation sustainability. And Tom, let's start by talking turkey, as it were. You can buy all the carbon offset credits you like, but at the end of the day, your business is great big planes in the sky. They are emitting gases. A lot of ground operations too. So net zero, is that a more tricky challenge for British Airways? What does your journey to net zero look like? What does net zero look like for British Airways?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I said the net zero looks like I'm in the right place with this event. So and it's a real pleasure to be able to talk about our strategy and how we're getting on. Net zero is challenging for nearly every business out there, and aviation is no different, and we are a hard-to-abate sector. So when we set our net zero target in 2019, I think we were the first industry group to do so. It was extremely ambitious, and over the last 5 or 6 years, we've been building out what does that look like and how are those plans progressing. And so, in terms of how we get to net zero, there's kind of 3 main things that we talk about. It's number 1, using less fuel. As you say, aircraft use fuel, and when you burn that fuel, it typically emits carbon dioxide emissions. So using less fuel by more modern aircraft, newer fleet, working with pilots to fly planes in more fuel-efficient ways, that makes a big difference. Using lower carbon fuels is second. So that's about SAF. So sustainable aviation fuel typically emits 80% less CO2 in its life cycle compared to jet fuel. So the more SAF we're using, the lower the CO2 emissions as well. Those 2 things combined can really help drive down our emissions. And then carbon removal. So carbon removal is really important. I think for any business looking to achieve net zero, you can't get there without some form of removal, or it's going to be unlikely. Aviation probably needs a bit more carbon removal than others. So that's third pillar. It's also really important. And we're glad to be making progress across all 3.
I bet there's not a single person in this room or watching online who, perhaps I'm wrong, very few, who haven't flown, who haven't driven a car, who haven't, we all use transport. So your aim is to provide it in the most sustainable manner possible to enable business and leisure to continue. You mentioned sustainable aviation fuel. That's not something that I've personally come across. What is it? How is it different to jet fuel? And where are you with introducing it? Okay.
Well, you've probably flown on it a little bit. So
yeah.
If you've flown from Heathrow over the last couple of years on a BA plane, or others are available, you probably have flown on a very small amount of sustainable aviation fuel, which is really exciting, because a few years ago, that just didn't exist. So SAF, which is our industry term, it's an alternative fuel that's made from a different feedstock to fossil fuel. And over this life cycle, it could be reducing CO2 emissions by 80–90%. So some SAF can be used from things like used cooking oil, like biodiesel, so to speak. And some SAF you can produce from actually capturing carbon from the atmosphere, mashing it with hydrogen, and producing an e-fuel. And we're starting to buy all these types of fuels now. So in 2023, we used about 1% SAF. So when I say this is new, it really is new. But we're ramping up as quickly as we can. And last year, very happy to announce that we actually used 2.7% of our overall fuel as SAF. So again, very early days, but we were coming from a standing start a few years ago. And our goal is to hit 10% by 2030. And we're already starting to see that the more SAF we use, the lower our carbon intensity. And our carbon intensity, which is emissions per passenger, has dropped by over 10% since 2019, in part delivered by this new SAF fuel that we're buying.
That's incredible. If I do actually get to go on holiday this year, I'll be flying on somebody else's used cooking oil.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But the key question is, does the entire journey consume SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, or do you mix it with jet fuel? Is it a whole new fuel?
And that's the beauty of SAF. It is what we call a drop-in fuel. So essentially, you blend it with traditional jet fuel, and it burns the same way. So on your aircraft, you won't know any difference. It'll burn the same way. Pilots fly it the same way. So the reason why it's good is that we can use it today. We don't have to change engines. We don't have to change infrastructure. We can literally drop it in at source into the pipeline or even at the aircraft. And legally, we can fly up to 50-50 blends. Now, we're not doing that at the moment because we are just trying to make sure we're getting as much into the system as possible. But over time, you'll start seeing the amount of staff on your aircraft, be higher. And our goal is to have 10% across our entire network by 2030, with the ambition of achieving up to 50, 70% by 2050. So that's a really key part of our net zero program is getting more staff into the system, which will really start reducing our emissions.
One of the big themes today has been about the need to create a proper business case. It's about the head and the bottom line as much as it is the heart. Does BA find that using SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, is better value for you as a business as well as helping you?
It's a great question. And SAF, like many early low carbon technologies, is more expensive. When you compare to jet fuel, you are paying a premium. We have been working with governments across the world, including the UK government, to incentivize. There's now a UK mandate. So this year, if you're supplying jet fuel to an airline, 2% of your fuel has to be SAF in 2025. Okay. And that's a UK government mandate. Yeah. So we're starting to see new regulations essentially forcing fuel suppliers and airlines to adopt this, but also incentives as well. Airports have incentives to promote the use of SAF. Certain states in America are paying producers tax credits to incentivize it as well. So when you add these incentives up in these regulations, the business case becomes stronger. And one thing that we've actually really benefited from is actually working with our corporate customers. So I've got a huge huge scope 1 footprint. Many of our corporate customers, banks, law firms, service companies, their footprint is in their scope 3, and it might be in business travel. So we actually are working with corporate companies to co-sponsor SAF because it can reduce our scope 1 and they can own the scope 3 attributes as well. Much like how you buy renewable energy and get a REGO, you can do the same thing with aviation fuel. And so actually co-sponsoring SAF in that way also helps us write the business cases and buy more.
This is picking out so many issues that I want to ask you about, but you speak there about collaboration with your customers and of course with your suppliers. And it's something that Jess on our panel a couple of sessions ago was talking about, the importance of collaboration. Is that the key to your journey to net zero?
It certainly is from a technology standpoint. Okay. So what British Airways is really good at is flying planes and burning fuel and taking you from A to B. We're really, really good at that. We don't produce aircraft. We don't design them. We don't develop them. We don't produce fuel. We don't capture carbon. So for our net zero plan to work, we need to partner with people who do all those things. So whether that is working with Airbus and Boeing on how they're designing the aircraft of the future, first to use less fuel. The new Airbus A350 is burning 35% less fuel than the aircraft they replaced for us a few years ago. Right, so working with these folks is really important. With SAF, we don't produce SAF ourselves. We actually do co-invest now in SAF plants to help get that industry up and running, but we can't do it ourselves. So collaborating is the only way we're going to achieve net zero. We are a really good user of products, but we need to work with the innovators and the entrepreneurs and the companies who produce them in order to help us get there.
Which takes us back to supply chain management, which has been a huge theme on this stage and, of course, next door today as well. So we've talked a lot about SAF, and you mentioned better, more fuel-efficient aircraft and different flying techniques for the pilots to reduce. How about on the ground? You have a vast ground-based operation too. What are you doing there?
So the majority of our missions are in the air, but it's really a key focus to drive sustainability across all of our business. So on the ground, we operate as a hub at a Heathrow primarily. So over 90% now of all of our ground vehicles are either fully electric or run on HVO fuel, which is kind of like biodiesel, SAF for ground fleet. That's removing about 5,000 tons of CO2 per year. That also engages customers, because if you're a BA customer and now you're getting onto an electric bus taking you to your aircraft, and you see that, you can feel that. It also helps us tell the story of how we're changing as a business as well. So that might have a smaller impact on our footprint than SAF or flying more efficiently, but it helps engage our colleagues and customers to demonstrate that we are making these changes everywhere. And that includes in the cabin as well. So that includes things like single-use plastic. we are an airline, but we are also one of the UK's biggest caterers. We sell 100 million cups of tea per year or something like that. So what are we doing to reduce single-use plastic? What are we doing in that space? In the last 3 or 4 years, we've removed over 250 tons of single-use plastic from on board. That has a good carbon story, but it's also a good way of engaging staff, engaging customers, to help them understand that we are committed to this throughout the operation and our value chain.
You've stolen my thunder. I wanted to ask you about customers and the impact on them and engaging them. You're clearly doing this, your journey for net zero, for a multitude of reasons. But talk to me about me, the customer. What difference does it make to me, and how are you engaging me in this?
So if you are a passenger going on your holiday every year, the feedback we get from customers is that they want us to act on this. They want to support us in ways they can, so by bringing their own water bottle on board, by potentially contributing towards things like SAF and carbon removals. Some do want to do that. Some say, this is your job, they're your emissions, take care of it. And that's what we're trying to do. Interestingly, more and more customers they're really passionate about causes they care about. So this is not net zero, but from a charitable perspective, we've raised over £30 million for comic relief, primarily through our customers donating. So there's a real drive for customers to get involved in the ways they can. But from a carbon perspective, we actually think they just want us to take care of it. And we do want to share with them, be transparent with them in terms of what we're doing, the emissions on each flight. And you can go onto our Collaborate system, plug in your route. We'll tell you exactly how much carbon that route is producing for you. We can give you the opportunity to act if you want to, but it's fairly voluntary. So we want to just tell our customers what we're doing and bring them on the journey without putting too much pressure on them to act for us. Corporate customers are a different story, because corporate customers, they have a need to reduce their emissions. Many businesses tell us that flying is really important for their day-to-day operations, their client management, seeing their supply chains, etc. So we want to keep facilitating that. Many businesses have Scope 3 targets. Many businesses, their business travel is the biggest part of their Scope 3. So working with them to understand their footprint, helping them travel smarter, helping them through co-sponsoring SAF, helps them achieve their goals. So we have different ways of engaging customers. But if you're just going on holiday this year, hopefully you're flying BA, and hopefully you'll start to see some of the changes we're making.
And to take what you said just one step further, does BA believe there are real business benefits affecting its bottom line and its profits in this laudable journey that you're on? It's one of the factors. Are you finding that customers are responding so well that actually this is not just a decision for the heart? It's been that some of the things you're putting in place are improving your bottom line. Is that happening? And what are they? Can you put your finger on those things?
Sure, definitely. And I think any sustainability professional around the room knows that you need to be talking that language to make progress and to keep fueling your program. Unless you're delivering that business benefit and you can articulate that to your boardroom, quickly your funds will dry up, and that's for any business. So I'm quite fortunate in a way that our number one emission is burning jet fuel. Jet fuel isn't cheap. So if I could work with a business to reduce how much we're burning, that's a great economic message to the business. We're driving efficiency, keeping fares low for customers. I'm also, saving CO2 as well. So if I can work with our route planning team to make a route more direct and save 5 minutes off your travel time, that's good for the customer. It's also using less fuel and burning less CO2. So some things are really straightforward. Waste reduction. If we can reduce the amount of waste we're putting into the cabin, that can also save on consumables. That saves money. So some things are really straightforward. Other things with SAF are less straightforward, because SAF on a one-to-one basis is more expensive. But the regulations coming in, we can make SAF have cost parity in some scenarios with using incentives, etc. But the UK is regulated now. Unless we're using 2% SAF per year, we're going to get a hefty fee. So, I'm trying to avoid those taxes. So it's a mixture of avoiding taxation, driving efficiency, and if we can also help retain and engage customers as well over the long term, that certainly helps. But I benefit from having some really good tangible feedback loops internally where I can keep driving investment in the right places.
I want to ask you about what you would say are British Airways' key milestones to achieve net zero. I am minded that we want to take a couple of questions as well. So if I can ask that question, then we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. So key milestones on your net zero journey.
So we've got a few public targets. Our long-term public target is obviously achieving net zero by 2050, but that's still a long way away. So that is the end goal. And to get there, we're coming up with a few, key milestones that we think if we hit them along the way, we've got a good chance. So the primary one is on SAF. I've spoken about how important it is. It makes up over a third of our net zero roadmap. And achieving 10% SAF by 2030 is really our short-term ambition, because if we think we can get there and help the industry get there, then the ability for us to take off, excuse the pun, in the 2030s and 40s to get to 50, 70% by 2050 becomes a lot easier. So the hard yards are going to be in the next few years on things like SAF, and helping that kind of get that technology curve to take off. So I think 10% by 2030 is really important for us, but we're also looking at things in regards to what we're doing regarding to reducing single-use plastic on board, tell the customer story, but also what we're doing on removals as well. So removals is a really huge part of our net zero journey. We're really starting that now. I think the last year we made a $10 million commitment to various removal technologies across the world. We want to speed that up, so by 2030, we've actually got a really good removals pipeline as well, because without buying them today, the supply won't be there by 2050. So that's also another milestone we're looking at.
Two questions have come in online, which you've answered both. What's the realistic scaling up of SAF in the next 5 to 10 years? But the other one, what are carbon removal projects that you're relying on for reaching net zero? Can you just describe it?
Sure. And one reason why I love carbon removals, similar to SAF, is that you can do them in many different ways. So like SAF, where you can make it from cooking oil, bioethanol, direct carbon from the atmosphere, removals is quite similar. So I've been on a personal journey with removals over the last 12 months. And we've been buying a portfolio of different types of technology. So it could be traditional nature-based removals, such as reforestation, afforestation, but really that will only get us so far. Things that we're really interested in, things like enhanced rock weathering. So how can we speed up natural processes to capture more soil, capture more carbon into our soil systems and keep them there underground? We're working on river and ocean alkalinity projects, where we're changing the pH of rivers and oceans in order to capture more CO2 in those water bodies and store that. We're also doing some interesting things around direct air capture. This is sucking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it underground. One of my favorite projects is with a firm in Scotland called the Carbon Removers, and they're actually placing carbon capture technology on whiskey distilleries. So that's a site visit I can't wait to go on.
Of course.
But this is looking at processes today that emit CO2 in any way, and how can we work with technology providers to capture it and store it. So there's a really exciting movement going on in the carbon removal space. And our job at BA, as I see it, is to help that innovation by buying now, giving them the scale they need. So by 2050, when we are getting towards our net zero deadline, there's enough scale in the market that we can actually hit those targets.
It's 1 o'clock UK time, which means that we've got to go on to the next session. Is there one more question in the room? There's a person right at the front. Beg your pardon, sir. Someone got their hand up before you. The microphone's just coming to you for one last question. Quick and prompt.
I'll be quick. Thank you. My name's Elena. I'm studying mechanical engineering and super interested in decarbonizing the aviation industry. Obviously, we have SAF technology, and it's pretty widely known that it works. It's pretty much equivalent to traditional jet fuel. So what is the biggest barrier, in your opinion, to a widespread implementation of SAF? Is it more on the technical side, or is it more financial, or is there something else?
That's a great question, because I paint a rosy picture of this thing works and we're all flying on it to a small amount. But the big challenge is, to your point, getting from 2.7% where we were last year to 10% to 50, 70%. That requires a lot of infrastructure. So essentially, it's a capital problem. The science is there, it's being proven every day. We need the capital investment in these facilities to get them up and running to produce the fuel for us to then use. So we're pretty confident that we can paint the picture of we are using it, we want to use more in the future. We are actually directly invested in some projects ourselves through our parent company, IAG, so we're actually helping to produce some of this capital, but we're not a bank. So it's a combination of regulations, incentives to support this, but also the influx of investment into these facilities so they can be built, and then once they're built, start producing, and we can start using. And the science is changing all the time. For a long time, feedstock has been a challenge as well, because if you look at only one SAF pathway, yes, that can get you so far. Use cooking oil isn't going to be the long-term solution. It's a solution for today. So it's also about finding the next innovation, the feedstocks that are going to be more plentiful, and working on those as well.
Amazing. Tom, I'm really sorry. We could sit here for the next hour, I think, discussing this, and we've skated across so much. I want to move on and talk data. I want to thank you for this. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. Tom Byrne from British Airways, ladies and gentlemen.